I want you to think about the last time your car made a sound it had never made before, and the specific sinking feeling of realizing you were not going to make it to wherever you were going without help. Most of the time, that moment resolves itself simply. You call for a tow, you wait, someone arrives, the story ends there, forgettable within a week. I want to tell you about the one time it did not resolve simply, and about the man who stopped to help me on a stretch of road I had never fully appreciated the isolation of until that exact evening. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I'm a 34-year-old woman, and 2 years ago I was driving home from a work conference in Springfield, Missouri, taking a rural 2-lane route my GPS had suggested as a shortcut through farmland and small, unincorporated communities I had never personally driven through before. It was early evening, the light starting to fade, when my engine made a sound I had never heard before, a harsh, grinding noise, followed almost immediately by a loss of power steering and a dashboard full of warning lights I did not have time to fully process before I managed to coast onto the narrow gravel shoulder. I sat there for a moment, engine off, hazards blinking, looking out at fields that stretched flat and empty in every direction I could see. No houses, no other cars, no cell service strong enough to place a reliable call, according to the single bar flickering at the top of my phone screen. This is the story of the man who stopped to help me on that road, and the 90 minutes I spent slowly realizing that stopping was not the same thing as helping. I tried calling for a tow truck first, the way anyone reasonably would, and got as far as a single ring before the call dropped entirely, my 1 bar of signal apparently insufficient to sustain an actual conversation. I tried again, same result. I tried texting my husband instead, hoping a text might squeeze through where a call could not, and watched the message sit there, unsent, a small spinning icon that offered no indication of whether it would ever actually go anywhere. I got out of the car and popped the hood, less because I expected to identify or fix the problem myself, and more because it felt like the only productive thing available to me in that moment. Steam, or possibly smoke, was rising faintly from somewhere near the engine block. I did not know enough about cars to interpret that as anything beyond generally bad. I stood there for what felt like a long time, watching the light continue to fade, doing the math on how far I was from the last town I remembered passing through, close to 20 minutes back by my estimate, meaning even if I decided to walk, I was looking at hours of rural road with no sidewalk, no street light, nothing except open farmland in every direction. It was in the middle of that calculation, standing beside my open hood in the deepening evening light, that I heard a vehicle approaching from the direction I'd come. The truck slowed as it approached, and I felt the specific, immediate relief of seeing a vehicle actually stop rather than simply pass by, which is, I think, the primary fear of being stranded somewhere this remote in the first place. Not that no one will come, but that someone will see you and keep driving anyway. The man who got out was probably in his 40s, wearing a plain work jacket, nothing about his appearance immediately alarming in any specific way. He walked over with an easy, unhurried gait, the kind of walk that suggested someone comfortable with roadside interactions, someone who had perhaps done this before. "Looks like you're having a rough evening," he said, glancing at my hood. "Mind if I take a look?" I said yes, grateful, still running through the calculations of distance and cell signal and daylight that had been occupying me for the previous 15 minutes. He leaned over the engine, made a few knowing sounds, the kind of practiced murmurs that suggested at least some familiarity with cars, and told me it looked like something with the radiator, possibly a belt as well. Nothing he could fix on the spot, but nothing that sounded like an unusual or exotic failure either. He offered me a ride to the next town, where he said there was a mechanic he knew personally who might be willing to come out even after hours. It was a generous offer. It was also, I would realize only gradually over the following 90 minutes, an offer built on several small details that did not entirely add up.
I did not get in his truck immediately. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. I told him I would prefer to wait with my own car, that I appreciated the offer but felt safer staying put until I could reach a tow service directly. He nodded, seemed to accept that without pushback, and offered instead to drive a mile or so up the road, where he said his own cell signal tended to be slightly better, to call the mechanic himself and relay the situation back to me. That felt reasonable. I stayed with my car, he drove off, and returned about 10 minutes later, telling me the mechanic could come but not for at least 2 hours, given the distance and the late hour, and that in the meantime, since the temperature was dropping and I had no working heat in a car with a dead engine, I might be more comfortable waiting in his truck's cab rather than out on an increasingly cold roadside. It was, again, a reasonable-sounding offer, and it was cold, and 2 hours is a long time to stand beside a dead car on an unlit rural road as full darkness sets in. I got in his truck. I want to walk you through what happened over the following 20 minutes because it is where the small, dismissible inconsistencies I had been ignoring finally became something I could no longer explain away. He started driving, not simply idling in place while we waited the way I had assumed, but actually driving, slowly in a direction that did not correspond to the town he had mentioned, according to a road sign we passed that pointed the opposite way entirely.
"This isn't the way to the town you mentioned," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could manage, watching the sign for that town recede behind us in the side mirror. "Shortcut," he said, without elaborating further, his tone unchanged, still easy, still unhurried, in a way that felt, suddenly, considerably less reassuring than it had 20 minutes earlier. I did not believe him. I want to be honest about the specific escalating fear that moved through me in that moment. Not panic exactly, not yet, but a very focused, very cold clarity about my actual situation. I was in a moving vehicle on an unfamiliar rural road in full darkness now, with a stranger who had just told me something that did not match the physical evidence of a road sign I had seen with my own eyes. I asked him to stop the truck. I said I'd changed my mind, that I would rather wait with my own car after all. He did not stop. He said we were almost to the shortcut's end, that turning back now would take longer than simply continuing, a logic that might have been true and might have been nothing more than a reason to keep me in that truck a few minutes longer. I looked at the door handle. I looked at my phone, still showing no reliable signal. I made a decision in that moment that I have thought about many times since. I told him firmly that I needed him to pull over immediately, that I was not comfortable continuing, and that if he did not stop the truck, I would open the door while it was moving. He stopped the truck. I do not know to this day whether my threat was what actually changed his mind, or whether he had simply reached whatever point he had been driving toward in the first place. I got out immediately, putting distance between myself and the vehicle before he had fully come to a stop, my legs unsteady in a way I had not expected. He did not immediately drive away. He sat there, engine idling, watching me through the windshield for what felt like an unreasonably long time.
long enough that I began seriously considering which direction I could run if he opened his door again. I held my phone up, even with no reliable signal, in a gesture that I hoped, if nothing else, looked like I was documenting the situation, taking a photo of his license plate, anything that might make continuing to a worse outcome feel less appealing to him than simply driving away. He drove away, not toward the town, not back toward my car, in a third direction entirely, taillights disappearing into the dark countryside, leaving me standing alone on an unfamiliar stretch of road, considerably further from my own vehicle than I had been 20 minutes earlier, with no idea in that moment how far I would need to walk to get back to it. I walked for close to 40 minutes before my phone signal returned strong enough to place a call, and I called 911 the moment it did, my voice shaking as I tried to explain, as clearly as I could, what had happened and roughly where I was. A sheriff's deputy found me not long after, still walking, and drove me the rest of the way back to my own car, now well past full dark, my hazards still faintly blinking on the empty roadside, exactly where I'd left them. I gave a full description of the man, the truck, the direction he'd driven, everything I could remember, with the specific adrenaline-sharpened clarity that fear sometimes leaves behind. The investigation that followed over the next several weeks eventually identified a man matching my description, who had a documented history, not a conviction, but multiple prior reports across 2 counties describing remarkably similar behavior, stopping for stranded motorists, offering rides, then driving in directions inconsistent with any reasonable route to help. None of those prior reports had resulted in charges, largely because, like mine, they had ended with the intended victim escaping before anything further occurred, leaving investigators with a pattern but never quite enough for an arrest. I do not know with certainty what would have happened if I had stayed in that truck. I have decided, deliberately, not to spend extensive energy imagining the answer. What I do know is that a series of small, individually dismissible inconsistencies, a wrong direction, a road sign that didn't match his explanation, an offer that kept shifting slightly further from what I'd originally agreed to, added up to something I trusted enough to act on, even without a single moment of overt, undeniable threat. If you are ever stranded somewhere remote, I want you to take one specific thing from what happened to me. Accept help cautiously and pay close attention to small details that don't quite align, even when each individual detail feels too minor to justify real alarm on its own. Trust your own read of a direction, a road sign, a shifting explanation, over a stranger's calm reassurance that everything is fine. And if you ever find yourself in a moving vehicle heading somewhere you did not agree to, do not wait for a clearer, more obvious sign of danger before insisting on stopping. The moment the direction feels wrong is the moment to act, not the moment after you've confirmed it with certainty you may never actually get. I made it home that night. I think about that stretch of road every time I drive past it now, and I have never once, since that evening, gotten into a stranger's vehicle again, no matter how cold, how tired, or how far from help I happen to be.